right, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the podcast. It's your host, Brent Bilski. Today, there was a lot in the NFL, free agency and all that. I'll get to that another day, and we got plenty of time to discuss it. I want to get into March Madness. It is right around the corner. I am quite excited, as you all should be, as I got the little logo there of the man screaming. It will try to drive you mad if you try to pick the bracket. It's the dumbest, is this going to be the year someone... It's never going to happen. I'll get to that in a minute. I also want to discuss why I actually think this is the year for the ladies. I am more excited about the women's tournament. This is not me being woke. This is not 2024, Brent. This is just, it's just better. There's better stories. It's more exciting. I'm going to get to all that. But like I said, almost everybody, whether you watch basketball, don't give a shit, it all comes down to most office pools, and everybody's going to have you pick your bracket, right? Who's going to win and who's going to get the perfect bracket is the constant discussion, and it's impossible. It is statistically not impossible, but it is literally one of the dumbest questions that happens every single year. And I can explain why and get into it, but I mean, this is a reason, besides the fact that it's all one and done games, it's one game, these kids, the biggest bright lights in their lives, and they're going to find out, with only one chance to do it, which is why there's so many upsets, and there's all these things that are very hard to predict. But I mean, also too, it's so many games. It's just, you can't do it. There's a lot of things you're going to be able to do in this life. I don't want to be the parent that tells you can't do something. You're not going to pick a perfect bracket. It is statistically impossible. This is why Susan from Accounts Receivable, who just picks on colors, are like, I think a tiger can beat up a snake. They don't pick for any real reason, and they end up having the best shot at it because it is too much to try to figure out. My favorite one of just giving you the idea of the math of just how much you're not going to be able to do this is been kind of statistically argued and debunked because it's all based on 50-50 win probability. I'm going to get a little nerdy here with you guys and kind of break some of this shit down, but it is 1 in 9.2 quintillion chance, according to certain mathematics, that you will pick a perfect bracket. If we can go ahead and put that one up there with my favorite movie in the background. 1 in 9.2 is 1.9.2 quintillion, is 1.92 with 17 zeros. That is your odds of picking a perfect bracket. Well, Brent, I'm not Albert Einstein. Help me break that down. 1 in 9.2 quintillion odds is basically the equivalent. So there is 7.5 quintillion grains of sand on the entire planet Earth, which means that if I made you pick from all the desert in all of the world, and you had one chance to pick 1 grain of sand and get that correct, you still have a 23% better chance than picking a perfect bracket because there's only 7.5 quintillion grains of sand on the Earth, and it's a 9.2 quintillion odds that you get this done according to that mathematics and those stats. To even try to further break this down, as we're going to go ahead and cut to one more, I'm going to get to a lot of the stuff quick here in the first part. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the Sahara Desert. Pretty big. The Sahara Desert, just so you know, makes up 10% of Africa, 8% of Earth. It is still only 15% of all the desert in all the world. So if I told you right here, looking at the desert there, if I said you had one chance to pick 1 grain of sand, you still would have to multiply this 6.5 times more and use all of that and scour all of that sand all over the planet, and you have one chance to pick the one proper little speck grain of sand. That would be the equivalent of you getting all of these games correct all the way down to the finals, including the score. It is statistically the dumbest thing you'll ever have to worry about. It's not possible. It won't happen. You won't be able to do it. It's 1 grain of sand on the entire planet is still a better chance. Now, other people have argued, as there's been more kind of brought into it, they're saying like, well, technically, some of these games aren't really, 50-50 odds. Some of these are better because of the higher seeding, lower seeding. And so some people say it's anywhere from 1 in 46 billion to 120 billion. So yeah, awesome. That's okay. Now it's much, that's no problem at all. I should just be able to figure that shit out on a Tuesday. I mean, only 1 in 120 billion. I still think it's 1 in 19.2 quintillion, especially nowadays, because it's getting harder and harder. Even the ones that are supposed to be the upsets aren't always going the way that they are, and there's a reason for that too. But anyways, I just wanted to throw that out at you to kind of give you an idea when people get upset about, oh, my bracket got busted on the first day. Almost everyone's bracket gets busted on the first day. There's a reason you're not going to be able to pick this right. You have a better chance picking grains of sand out of the goddamn desert than you do doing this correctly, and you're not going to be able to win. It's no big deal. Doesn't mean, it's not a shot on your knowledge or basketball or whatever. Don't take offense to it there. But if you are going to try to at least get close, and by the way, statistically, the closest one ever was 53 of 64 of the games has been predicted correctly. That's the most that's ever happened so far. So if you at least want to give it a shot, getting more into the actual games themselves and back into March Madness, should you quote unquote get to upset? Maybe. It's an interesting thing going on, and this will be the reason I'll be most curious watching the NCAA tournament, at least the men's side this year, is trying to see and watch as basketball evolves into a whole different world, because it really is harder and harder because there's more and more upsets every year. There's a reason behind this I call the Shaq Leitner effect. I'll get to that in a minute. But I mean, to pick quote unquote an upset, they've done the math on this. There has been, every upset now is defined, not just like an 8 and 9 seed beating each other or, a 10 versus 7. You have to have at least 5 seeds separating in order for it to be considered a statistical upset. So like, a 16 versus 1, 15 versus 2, 14 versus 3, 12 versus 5. You have to have at least 5 seeds of separation to be considered quote unquote an upset to all of the things I'm about to bring you here. But even then, there has been more in the last decade than there ever has been in NCAA tournament history. Matter of fact, there has been 5 of the top 10 most upset-laden years have been in the last decade. And the tournament's been going on since like 1939. So it's been going on for a minute. There's been more of half of the, most of the top 10 upsets have actually occurred in the last 10 years. Also, at least since 2021, there's been at least 10 upsets total or more in every single tournament. So now it's making it even harder to try to pick your bracket, because you got to pick for no reason why a Farley Dickinson will beat a Kentucky, and it has no statistical, point or reason or rhyme. It's just, I don't know, felt like it. And so that is something that is going to make it even more, I don't want to I really feel like I'm doing like a TED Talk or being a professor trying to explain to you statistical odds. I'd really rather get back into the basketball here. So one of the reasons I do think this is happening, as like I said, 5 of the top 10 most upset years have been in the last decade. We've had 10 upsets at least every year since 2021. And in 2021 and 2020, we had 14 upsets. So if you're trying to pick your bracket, you're going to have to pick at least 10 to 15 different times where at least in a 5-seed difference, like a 16-1 or a 15-2, you're going to have to pick that probably at least 10 to 15 times to even have a shot at your bracket, even being close to properly done. And there's a actual basketball reason for all this, and I call it the Shaq versus Leitner effect. As, we go ahead and we have it up here. This is something that I don't think enough people really, and it's an interesting kind of discussion of what is happening with college basketball. Why are we becoming less interested in it? But other than March Madness becomes very exciting. Why is March Madness so exciting? Why do we have so many upsets? Once upon a time, and this is really what I'm trying to discuss when I'm saying the Shaq versus Leitner effect. Once upon a time, Christian Laettner was better than Shaquille O'Neal. And this is what's happening now when you watch a lot of these teams here. The older, more experienced, but less talented guy in college is going to beat the more talented, but younger, less experienced guy who eventually is going to become better than him. So, once it all got played out, obviously anybody that knows anything about basketball, Christian Laettner was clearly never what Shaquille O'Neal was in both of their primes. Christian Laettner, when he made it to the NBA, was a one-time All-Star who had no rings and had a decent career, 12.8 points per game and 6.7 rebounds. Shaquille O'Neal, however, was a 15-time All-Star to his one, had 4 rings to his none, had 3 finals MVPs to Christian's none, and averaged 24 points and 11 rebounds versus his 12.8 and 6.7. So, why didn't that equate in college? Because as he, this is a direct quote from Shaq. You can look at it himself. When he talks about in college, and he once also too famously got picked in the 92 Dream Team over Shaq, and a lot of people were upset about that. And while Shaq said he did use that for motivation, he also said, look, that white boy ate me up in college. Christian Laettner was clearly better than me. Christian Laettner kicked my ass because, again, it was an older, more experienced, less talented guy who eventually was never going to be as good as Shaq, but he caught Shaq when he was young, and even though he had more raw talent, he did not have the experience, he did not have the abilities yet, he was not big and strong as he once was. You got to think the average 18-year-old versus the average 21-year-old, and just how much you grow just at the average person. These guys are athletes, they're freaks. A lot of these guys will go from like 6'6" to 6'10" in between 18 to 21 years old. Dennis Rodman famously got, I think, 6 inches in probably more areas than one, and I'll ask Carmen Electra about that later. Anyways, you get what I'm saying. The point is that in college, and this is why you're going to see, and it's going to happen, I think, more and more and more each year, everyone's going to be looking around going, God, there's all these upsets. These little teams are beating these big schools. What's going on? It's Shaq versus Christian Laettner. It is the more talented guy who's not there yet having to go against the not so talented guy, but who is bigger and stronger right now and who has more experience than him, at least in today's game. It's not going to be 3 years from now. It's not going to be, it's not a full body of work. It's who goes against who on that day for one game in the NCAA tournament. And that's why you have to pick some of the weirdest, hardest to describe upsets that are, they're not going to make any real sense at all. And almost every time it's going to be some school you never heard of, and they're going to take on the blue bloods and the one and dones. That has been one of the main reasons, with the NBA and their weird one and done rule, where they've allowed you have to spend at least 1 year outside of high school. There's been a lot of adjustments with that. A lot of people are now going to Europe. Some people are going to the G League. But a lot of these guys will go to college for 1 year and then will jump to the NBA because that's the rule that they have to do in order to get there. And so with that, you're going to see a lot of guys who are top 2, 3 seeds go down to the lower seeds because they're 18, 19-year-old kids who aren't quite there yet. Matter of fact, 5 of the biggest upsets in the last 5 years were all the Christian Shaq mid-major blue blood. It was all the exact same thing. Matter of fact, I'll go ahead and give them to you here as I change my little papers. The 5 biggest upsets the last 5 years were exactly what I'm talking about, the Shaq versus Christian, where there was actually the only times ever that we had the 16 beat the ones. That used to never happen. Used to never see the 16 seed beat the 1 seed. It's happened twice in the last 5 years. And what were those 2 times? It was 2018. Some of y'all might remember UMBC taking out Virginia. That was when UMBC had a guy named Lyles, a senior, who had 28 points that game. And they beat Virginia, who had guys, their top guys were actually a Kyle guy and Ty Jerome, who were their top 2 players and actually were going to go on to the NBA, but they were only sophomores at the time, got beat by the seniors. In 2023, Farley Dickinson actually beat Purdue 16-1. Only the second time that's happened in NCAA history. Farley Dickinson had 2 seniors at the top, and then they had 2 juniors and no freshmen. Purdue had 2 freshmen, and Edey, who's going to be an NBA top pick, was only a junior that year. With the last 5 years, there was 2 times the 15 seed beat the 2 seed. That first time was St. Peter's versus Kentucky back in 2022. They had 4 juniors and 1 senior. Kentucky had Ty Washington, who was their best player at the time. Again, only a freshman. He played like shit. Unfortunately, Ty was 2 of 10 from the field that day, 5 points, 1 assist. Number 2 ranked Kentucky lost a little 15 seed St. Peter's with all their older guys. Princeton, Arizona, same thing. Top 2 scorers for Princeton were seniors with 4 juniors going against Arizona, whose 2 of their best players were freshmen. The only 14-3 that's happened over the last 5 years was Abilene Christian versus Texas. And this is probably the best example I can give you of why, if you're going to try to predict the unpredictable, why you have to look at those mid-major school you never heard of and look at one of the big blue bloods that's got a bunch of young guys. Texas in 2021, when they lost to Abilene Christian, had no business losing that game, 3rd seed to the 14 seed, had 3 of their 4 guys that were going to go to the NBA. The University of Texas had 4 guys on their roster that year that would end up being NBA draft picks. The problem was 2 of them were sophomores and 1 of them was a freshman. On the other side, Abilene Christian, who had nobody that was ever going to go to the NBA, did have their top 4 or 5 players were either juniors or seniors. It is the Christian versus Shaq effect. It is the less experienced, more talented guy who eventually is going to be a better player, is going to lose in college to most likely the less talented, but more, overall stronger, bigger, older, and more experienced dude. And that is probably, if there was any metric I could give you. Any one little thing like what to look for in trying to find that impossible grain of sand in the Sahara Desert. That's the best I can give you. Now, which ones exactly? I'm not going to get into that because it really ended up becoming years of doing this. Just a lot of research for nothing. Like I said, it's luck. It's coin flipping. It's nonsense. It's your favorite color in a lot of ways. But the only hint I can give you at how do you pick the upset, try to pick the mid-major with the fully loaded junior senior roster versus, the blue blood that's going to have the NBA guy who's on a one and done and, really isn't ready for the lights, the stage, and that one shining moment, as the NCAA likes to call it. Hopefully you don't trademark me on that. But moving on. So that was, a lot of nerd talk and kind of, explaining the obvious. Let me get more into the part I'm more excited about. And for the first time ever, I'm really into the women's tournament this year. And I'm not saying that to be whatever. I'm being quite honest with you. This is the first time, maybe ever, I think that the women's tournament will not only rival, could beat a lot of the men's tournaments games in television ratings, attendance, eyeballs, media coverage, the whole works. And not because it's being forced. This isn't the Marvels movies. This isn't, some sort of, Madam Web nonsense or something being, the Ghostbusters debacle. Thank God they redid those with, the four ladies that just wasn't very good. This isn't any of that. This isn't anything being pushed on us. This isn't nonsense. The women's basketball game right now in college has more exciting games. It has more stars. It has a better storyline. And really, it's the whole group of Supergirls here, but it's really the Caitlin Clark effect. Let's keep it a buck, as we can go ahead and put that up there. I call this the Caitlin effect. Caitlin Clark Kent, whatever you want to call this girl. This girl has just really brought an insanely new amount of eyeballs, including myself, starting from last year. She is the female Steph Curry. She is worth every price of admission, but it's not just her, as she kind of introduced me to it. And I think a lot of us to the women's game more than just being told we had to or being, oh, you're a dick if you don't, da-da-da-da. As a genuine fan, as I started watching her last year, going back to the Final Four and then losing to Angel Reese and the whole, that thing there, there's a plethora of stars in this tournament. You got Caitlin, of course. There's Juju Watkins from USC, who a lot of people are now propping up as the next big thing. And she really is. Juju's up next. She's the freshman this year. She's up next. She's a bad, bad girl. You still have Angel Reese at LSU. You have South Carolina with the big 6'8" Cardozo and those little freshmen, Full Wiley. You got Beckers. You got Brink. But as you can see just from the graphic here, Caitlin Clark, amongst her many records that I'll get into, just passed Steph Curry for the most threes made in a single collegiate season. And she is the closest I've seen to a female version of Steph. Anybody remember Steph Curry watching them at Davidson? He was so goddamn fun to watch. He was just, it was very few people. Let me take a breath here. Very few people have the ability to just, make you just enjoy watching a regular season who gives a crap game. Steph Curry had that. And still has in Golden State. But when he was at Davidson, he was getting LeBron to show up. He was getting all sorts of stars to come watch little Davidson to go watch Steph Curry because he was just that good a performer. He was that electric. He was just that much of a different type of cat. Caitlin Clark, if you watch her, is on that same level with the, the long shots, the difficulty and everything else going into it. So, she just passed Steph Curry, and the eyeballs, as you can see too on this, are starting to get into it. They now have a bigger audience. The women's basketball game at the end of this season has had a bigger audience than the men in a lot of situations. And Shannon Sharp, who I thought I'd never give credit to having a great quote, had an awesome one. He said, I can name 5 women now quicker than I can name 5 men in college basketball. That is a Caitlin Clark women's basketball effect. That's absolutely true. This is the first time ever. If you asked me to name 5 collegiate men, I would struggle. I just don't give a shit. They're all one and done and leaving. There's no real rivalries or anything to really get excited about. There's no story. There's nothing to sink my teeth into. The women's game, if you ask me name 5 off the top of my head, easily. That's, again, Caitlin, Juju, Paige, Brink, Angel, Cardozo, Full Wiley. I can actually, and I can't ever say I've been able to do that as a basketball fan. I cannot say before this season that I could quickly name off 5 women way before I can name off, 5 men on the other side of the ball there. That is phenomenal. That is something that they really need to try to embrace and try to really, run with, rather than some of this. And look, I get it. It's unfortunate, but I get it a little bit. Besides the fact, like I said, I agree with Shannon's quote. There's a lot of stuff going around with the Caitlyn thing, because she has been the biggest story, arguably in basketball, for over the last season. I'm going to call this little point I want to make here white point wrong example. We can go ahead and pop this one up here. I will concede, and look, I know how I look like. I know who's delivering this message. I will concede that there is, in both sports and entertainment, a plethora of examples of where the white star in both sports or, rap or music gets more push, gets more love, gets more attention, maybe gets a lot of things that are undeserved. If I concede that to the court of public opinion, can you concede to me that there is at least a few where, dude, the talent is so undeniable, you just sound like a hater and you just sound dumb? It doesn't happen very often, but in both sports and entertainment, there's at least a few where if you try to go, oh, that's just simply because it's a white person, they don't like letting the white, they always give the white person love. I'm putting Caitlyn in this category with M, Larry Bird, and Caitlyn. I think all three of those are fair examples of like, dude, if you really just try to say it's nothing but a racial thing, there is obviously that component, but to not give them their flowers or not give them their credit, you just sound like a hater. You just sound kind of dumb. Caitlin Clark falls into that category so strongly that she might be the top of the three. I mean, at least with Larry, you could argue that, between Magic Johnson and others, there were people even in his era, Julius Erving, Moses Malone, there were people in his era that you could, at least compare and say that he was either better or, actually beat Larry Bird. Magic beat Larry Bird in the collegiate NCAA finals. Magic, beat Bird more in the NBA in championships when they went head to head. Eminem, can be a lot of goofiness. He can be a lot of silliness. Most people will give him the wordsmith, but you'll have people say, there's certain places that still don't bang Eminem the way they do other artists and stuff. All right, fair enough. Caitlyn, as far as the numbers go, is by far your least effective argument when you say like, oh, it's just because she's the little white girl from Iowa and everybody likes to cheer for her. Some of that is true. However, the numbers are bananas. I want to just give you all the numbers just so you can truly understand. When you talk about Caitlin Clark and what she's done, she is clearly the best player in all of collegiate basketball, especially on the women's side. Do you need to know the list? I'm going to go ahead and give it to you anyways. She's not just once again leading Iowa, who's the number one seed this year and looks like a very good contender for the national championship. She's number one in the NCAA women's in scoring at 31.9 points per game. She's also number one in assist at 8.9. She is first in the NCAA women's division in both scoring and assist. The second person next to her that a lot of people compare her to, Juju Watkins, and say, oh, Juju's better. Juju's just as good as Caitlyn. Just so you know, she averages 27 points a game. She averages 5 less points per game than Caitlyn and only 2 assists to her like 9. So she goes from Caitlyn, who's first, to Juju, who's second, but 5 points behind, and is at like 2 assists, which is like in the 150th. And that's the one you try to tell me is already better than Caitlin Clark. Let's even try to just quickly and just go through and then ignore what she did last year, having the 191 points in the NCAA tournament, which is, by the way, the most points ever scored on both the men or the women's side by 14 points. Forget the fact that she's the only person ever, men or women, that's had a triple-double of 41 points as a triple-double in one game in an NCAA tournament. Only man or woman to ever do that. Forget the fact she had 25 threes in the NCAA tournament run, also the most ever scored in both the men or women's side. How about the fact that she's now the all-time leading scorer for both men or women's collegiate basketball, passing Pistol Pete Maravich? How about the fact that she is now the all-time women's scorer after passing the legendary Lynette Woodard just a couple, a month or two ago? She's already been the NCAA women's scorer. She's already done past Kelsey Plum. She's also the only NCAA player, both man or woman, to lead her conference in scoring and assist all 4 seasons she played. She's the first Division I player ever to score 3,700 points, 1,000 assists, 850 rebounds in a career, both man or woman. She's the all-time leader in 30-point performances on both men or the women's college side in the last 25 seasons with 56 total. She has 20 career games with 30 points, 10 assists, and no one in college women's game the past 25 seasons has more than 2. I'm going to repeat that one more time. She has 20 career games with 30 points and 10 assists. The next woman close to her the last 25 years has 2. Since 2021, she has 440 points game against AP top 10 teams. No man or woman has done that in the entire time since she's been playing. She's Iowa's all-time leader, both on the men and women's side in assists, points, three-point field goals, scoring. I mean, and by the way, doing all of this with everybody trying to shut her down. Do not get it twisted. There is no love. There is no, mercy when everybody who goes out to play Caitlin Clark goes at her hard. Everybody is tired of her. A lot of people are sick, especially the other players, the Jujus and Angels, as you saw with the whole thing. They're sick of hearing about her. They want to beat her up. They want to make her lose. The couple times she's been upset this year, they stormed the court and celebrated like they won a national championship. It was just a regular season game. She is considered and been doing all of these things that I just told you, both on men and women's side, crushing every record possible, first in scoring, first in assists by a long shot, completely dominating the game with every single time she steps on the floor, the entire team, the entire coaching staff, and whoever's going against her, giving her 100% best. If you try to tell me with a straight face that Caitlin Clark is only getting this attention after everything I just gave you because, she's the white girl, they like giving the white girl her love, stop it. It's the Eminem, Larry Bird. You make a point as far as society in general. You do not make a good point when it comes to this girl. You just sound stupid. You sound a little bit like a hater, and you kind of sound like a jackass. The good news is that no matter why you're watching, everyone's watching. And so I'm going to take this back, now as we get into it, to why I think the NCAA women's tournament is going to actually be a lot more fun to me for watch, is that we might see records. She's already been setting records. Caitlin has been setting a lot of different records here. Can we go ahead and pop the old graphic up, the other one with the Caitlin, the one before that? Sorry, I might be messing up my man Corey here. Hopefully he won't get... He says we're good. All right, we're me and Corey, we're riding here. The television ratings, as I had the little thing there, says a bigger audience than men's college basketball. It's crazy. It's kind of like, the Larry Bird, I'll call this the Larry Magic effect. A lot of people don't realize that the NBA almost went away. I don't know if a lot of people remember that. 1979 and then to 1980, after the Larry Magic Collegiate Finals, the NBA Finals was on freaking tape delay. The NBA Finals was not considered worthy of being aired live in 1980. They went to like some movie or a rerun of Knight Rider or something. They thought that was going to get more eyeballs to it than the NBA. Then Magic and Larry showed up and they created a whole new wave of fans. Next thing you know, a struggling sport suddenly was risen to where it is now. Women's basketball is kind of in that same category right now, and it has everything to do with that lady right there and the other people underneath her to make there a lot of interesting stories and things to keep an eye on that all of us are keeping an eye on. Just so you know, and let me just go ahead and run through this. When Caitlin actually this year broke her record, there was 4 million people watching that game. That's the most since 1999, and that was with UConn and Tennessee, two big schools going at each other back when this was, 25 years ago, whatever it was. That's the last time anyone's had the same amount of eyeballs as they did right now on Caitlin in Iowa when she broke the record. It is actually the second most watched college game in the entire year, man or woman. And I don't think a lot of people know that. This is actually, when she broke the record, the scoring record, that was the only game that beat them on both the men or women's side, was a Michigan State-Arizona game, and that just happened to be on Thanksgiving and follow a football game. So I don't think a lot of people actually tuned in to watch that game. It was probably just, left over because they were watching the football game and they all had, the turkey naps and tryptophan and all that other stuff. Next thing you know, that game got a bunch of ratings. So, honestly, that might have been the most watched collegiate game all year this year. It was a women's basketball game of Iowa versus Ohio State. If you don't want to, give anybody their flowers or talk star power, you let me know in the next million years, the next time Iowa and Ohio State's women's basketball is the most watched collegiate game all season long. I'll go ahead and I'll keep an eye out that for you. Then you can tell me you told me so. Besides the fact too, just so you know, the other thing, I can kind of go on and on with this stuff. She has now the most watched women's basketball games on ABC, Big Ten Network, Fox, FS1, NBC, Peacock. She has now the second and third most watched basketball games in Big Ten Network history. The national championship, obviously last year with LSU, was 9.9 million. That was the most watched women's game of all time. The continued attendance record she's getting getting are absolutely insane. Everywhere they go is a sellout. Let's see, they've sold out or broken attendance records in 30 of the 32 games they've been in any stadium right now this entire season. The only two that weren't were on this neutral site in Florida for like a preseason game. Iowa women's basketball actually got 55,000 people into a football stadium. They set an attendance record this year for a preseason game. They sent the all-time women's attendance record. 55,000 people came to watch Iowa play women's basketball. They filled up the football stadium better than the football team did it. They've had sold-out road crowds in like northern Iowa for the first time in school history. They sold out Northwestern Ohio State for the first time in program history, Nebraska for the first time in program history. Vivid Seats just released data. The average ticket right now for a Caitlin Clark game is up, let's see, 224% than the average ticket that it's been before. People have traveled an average of 35% longer distance. I've seen people on television said they drove them and their kids 10 hours to go watch this girl play. So there's a lot of eyeballs on the women's game, and a lot of it has to do with her. So all that being said, I have a request. I have a request to the NCAA women's just organization in general as we are getting towards the tournament. And again, I am genuinely more excited about watching y'all than I am watching the boys. Fix it. Fix this to make exactly what I'm about to give you, because most people believe this shit anyways. Most people, I've heard people say this all the time, all the games are rigged, it's all a script. NFL even made a joke of it this year. They finally just started doing like commercials where they were, I think it was Key from Key and Peele. They're all sitting around in a room going like, oh, we're going to have so-and-so win the Super Bowl. We're going to have Taylor show up and Travis make out, blah, blah, blah. I mean, most people seem to actually believe it, which that's a whole nother show for a whole nother day of why I think you're just a little bit goofy. But if it is, let's go with it. Let's go with the hypothetical. If the leagues are scripted and sports is scripted, I am begging you, NCAA women's basketball, not just for my sake, but for your own, and to maybe actually beat the ratings of the men this year, I am begging you for this Final Four. Corey, if you can go ahead and pop this up for me. This Final Four, if they can get it done and actually projected, it could possibly happen, would set every record possible. This would be the Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, 1979, finals game where they set the record. This could set all-time records of the most exciting and most intriguing Final Four. And if there's ever been an opportunity to fix games, write a script, fix the refs, I don't care what you got to do, make these four happen, because there is an actual real probability, according to the projections, because you got number 1 seeded Iowa, number 2 seeded LSU, number 1 seeded USC, and number 1 seeded South Carolina, all going to be in these separate brackets here. We could have this Final Four where we have Iowa versus LSU, and then we have South Carolina versus Southern California, and then the champions go play each other, which has to be Caitlin versus Juju, Magic versus Larry, Farm Girl versus California. This is written out of a Hollywood script. This is perfect. And even the Final Four is written perfectly. The only thing we need to happen in quote-unquote an upset is we need Angel and LSU coming off their loss to South Carolina. They're going to be the number 2 seed. They're going to have to take care of Stanford to come out of their bracket. So again, NCAA women's, pay the refs. I don't give a shit what you got to do. Fix this, because if we get the matchups that I'm talking about, this dream Final Four, we will start off on one side. We'll have Caitlin take on Angel, the most watched collegiate finals game ever in women's history from last year. They will get to repeat and play each other again. And not only that, LSU added Haley Van Lith. For those of you who don't remember, Haley Van Lith is the girl from Louisville who Caitlin supposedly did the whole thing to, and then Angel did it to her back in the NCAA finals. It became a whole thing. She's actually on LSU now, for people not keeping up. She actually transferred in the portal and joined LSU. So now in the first round, you get to have in the Final Four, we can have Caitlin get her quote-unquote get back on Angel, and Haley Van Lith, the girl from the entire other college that now has joined LSU Tigers. Then on the other side, you have the undefeated South Carolina with Cardozo, fresh off her fight where she, I think some of y'all saw that, the LSU thing, where she just hip-checked that poor girl into oblivion. 6'8" Cardozo, undefeated South Carolina, who Caitlin beat last year, would now hopefully play USC and Juju Watkins, who was up next, who was the next Caitlin. So on that side, we now have Juju beat South Carolina again, the same way Caitlin beat South Carolina last year. Now Juju does the same thing that Caitlin did just last season. She also upsets Goliath. She also, quote unquote, Caitlins them. And then in the NCAA finals, after Caitlin gets her get back, after Juju established herself as the Caitlin of the future, we have them meet in the NCAA finals for the championship. Juju versus Caitlin, South Carolina, Iowa, Flash, Farm, black, white, young, old. I mean, seriously, if you wrote this out in a Hollywood script, they would almost call bullshit. And all we have to do is get number 2 LSU and the rest of the number 1s to fit in this bracket. If I have ever been right about anything, I am right about this one. If you can get this done, this will be the most watched women's Final Four. This might actually beat the men's Final Four when it comes to ratings. I can tell you right now, if there's like some little upset or there's some nonsense, I can't even really think. I mean, North Carolina Duke, I'm trying to think of a Final Four game I would be way more interested in, or even more interested remotely at all, than if you told me on one side I have Juju trying to take on South Carolina, and on the other side I get LSU and Angel going at Caitlin again, and another Final Four rematch and another championship rematch the year before they both go to the WNBA to be drafted, probably both in the top 5. Caitlin won, Angel's been projected top 5. I'm in. I'm in. I'm there early. If I could afford tickets, I would go. This would be probably the most exciting game I would watch all season because unfortunately my Golden State Warriors are not most likely going to win a championship this year. So that would arguably be the game, if I could write one, that I'd be genuinely most excited about. I think I would be most excited to see LSU and Caitlin go at it again in Iowa. And I have to mention the other Iowans. They're all decent players. Martin, there's a full Becker or something. There's a few others I can play. It's Caitlin's team. LSU actually has some other good players. It's Angel's team. Angel's the one who visited the White House. Angel's the one everyone talks about and is the rematch that was most watched from last year. I'd love to watch them go at it again. And then have, once Caitlin hopefully would win that game, I want her to go against Juju because everybody's already arguing because of some of the reasons I had mentioned before, that Juju's already better. She's not statistically better. She hasn't won more. She hasn't done more. But people want her to be better. Fine. Let her prove it. Let her prove it. Let her go against Caitlin in the NCAA finals after they both go and beat who they need to beat. And I will be the happiest little pig in poop that you've ever seen. Sorry, my girlfriend hates when I say poop. But I really do think it could rival. I really do think it will either rival or beat the men's, which would be unprecedented. And it would be, in today's world, what a great thing for, diversity. What a great thing for, evolving the male opinion. Like I said, I was a staunch, I don't watch women's, I don't care. It's stupid. It's boring. They can't dunk, da-da-da-da. If you're still on that racket, if you're still on that train, you haven't been watching and you're kind of the same thing. This is, I talked before, you're kind of a hater and you're kind of a dick. All right. I think I'm good on all that. Let me look at the time here. I did want to at least try to get some fun videos. Corey, do we got time? We got time. Nice. Just take a breath. This is more just fun. I just enjoy kind of watching. These are somewhat sports related, dumb, funny videos that entertain me. Hopefully entertain you. For people that are listening right now on the podcast, I'm going to put all this up on YouTube and TikTok if it's still around. I don't know if y'all caught that. There was a law. They're trying to ban TikTok. Hopefully that doesn't happen. They actually have some followers now. But anyways, yeah, just dumb videos to make me laugh. Let me start off with, this was on a golf course. I'm going to guess Australia. I mean, this is clearly just some guy fighting a kangaroo. Kangaroos are bastards. Kangaroos will get you. Look at that. Knocked him down. I love, too, by the way, I've seen this already. Watch the guy in the cart. He just, really? You think it's going to stop a rabid kangaroo? He barely... Sit down. Sit down. How to speak Australian. Golf ass kicking. Look at that thing go. Look at that thing go. Yeah, so that was just, I don't know. It has to be, right, Corey? Australia? Yeah. I mean, it's, maybe Texas. I didn't know this. Do you know that Texas actually, we'll get to that one in a second here. You know Texas actually has more wild animals, that's where I'm from, more wild animals than, I think, they have more tigers in captivity in Texas than all of the world combined. We're a weird state. I love my state. I love Texas. We're an odd group, and we like weird freedoms. One place this can't be then is Texas. This next video, this is a squirrel, and it's sports because he pulled out a baseball bat. But I'm curious we never get to meet Julie. Who is Julie? Because this little squirrel comes in, and this big man with a bat needs Julie to save his ass. All right, here we go. What's Julie gonna do? Okay, I had to run it a couple times just to show you there. Who's Julie? Why is Julie helping? You were a grown-ass man with a bat. Why are you bringing your secretary into your mess? The shriek is phenomenal. It's my favorite part. My favorite part. Jumps on the desk. Where's Julie? I gotta meet Julie. I gotta know what Julie does and why she would be better equipped to handle that poor squirrel than this pussycat here with a baseball bat. This one is, I don't know, Father of the Year, possibly. I don't want to call this Father Tortures Son with an Angry Cock because it's not that type of show.
You can't run from him. He's going to win. Yeah.
I think this is okay, clearly, to share. This is probably Texas. This might be my state. This could be us. Yeah! Come on, son. You got to show it who's boss. Give it to Ding Dang Do. Look at this poor kid.
Jax, you're winning. You're winning.
Can we do the math on like the seconds per hours of therapy scale that's about to happen here? This poor kid. Gonna be scared to cock the rest of his life. Last one, just for fun. And just before you put it up here, just so you know, I have 3 dogs, and I have a pretty good organization with my leashes and stuff. I have 3, and I can barely keep them from crisscrossing. If anyone's ever tried to walk dogs, they can be pains in the ass. I have no idea. Is this maybe Cesar Millan, for the Dog Whisperer, went on to golf, but this is bananas. If anyone's ever owned a dog, this is bananas. Look at this dude. This dude is walking 10 dogs playing golf, who are all just sitting there, not running around, not humping each other, not biting the caddy. Look at this. Just sitting there. How in God's... I can't get 3 dogs on a leash. I literally had one of my dogs pee on my other dog's face. That actually happened. I'm not even kidding. Peed on my dog's face as they were walking each other. Good old Caesar over here has got 10 of them calm, cool as a cucumber, just watching him play golf. They don't bark during his backswing. Nothing. How the hell does he do that? I guess that's the way they said when Caesar, the Dog Whisperer, got the job, he could walk. They said that he had like 50 dogs. He was just walking down the other freeway with 50 dogs, no leashes behind him. They were like, how the hell do you do that? How the hell do you do that? I literally had my dog urinate on the other's face. I had to go take it and hold it up weird in the shower and wash its face off. He's able to golf 18 holes with 10 of them just staring there, giving him a little paw of applause there. Fascinating. A lot of things I can't do. Like continue. I think I'm out of time, so I got to go. Once again, good luck picking your bracket. Maybe, visit the Sahara Desert, see how you do with that. You might actually have more luck. And other than that, I'll talk to you next time. Corey, thanks for your help, and we'll see you then. Bye.